All right, everyone, let's talk about what brought you to this group or this video. Change, fear, excitement, wellness, nourishment. Probably a little of all of those things. What brought me to this started with moving into a traditional diet years ago. I'd let go of most of those box foods. However, it didn't seem to make a difference. What I found was that even though I was eating all of the good pastured food, I still had the asthma, I still had the anxiety, I still had the bloat and the freezing histamine intolerance. So then I added in a superfood shake daily, which did help some. I started to lose weight and then it was reformulated. It was a big aha moment, yet what I realized was that nutrition was something I needed to think more about. Now, you would think, having all of the food allergies I developed when I was in my teens and all the severe IBD that I had suffered with, that I would have figured out this sooner, but I didn't figure a lot of this out for a long time. So I don't want you, if you're just starting this challenge, to look at this as 30 days, because in truth, you are on a learning journey. Who am I? I am Barbara Christensen. I am a holistic lifestyle and wellness coach. I have a diploma in personal nutrition. I am a certified aromatherapist. I am a certified group fitness instructor and personal trainer, as well as a certified energy healer in a variety of modalities. And I just love nutrition and ingredients. I love the veggies. When I read The Veganist at the start of the year about a decade ago, I immediately joined the 21-day Kickstart and went vegan. And so I've learned and kind of leaned in and out of veganism to vegetarianism since then. But I do find that I feel the best when I stick with my vegan choices. I also am the type of person that knows I don't want to go back to the heaviness emotionally or physically that I had been before having my daughter and before having all of these changes. And I find that when my adrenal fatigue really kicks up and I get the most stressed, that's when I start to crave those extra omegas from the eggs and the salmon. Some of that has changed though, because I did find a really couple of great omega sources. But I also, those adrenals is when I start craving the sugar. So this whole process was really about a lifestyle for me. And I'm really glad that so many of you have found an interest in it as well. So let's talk about what I recommend as your starting point. Ditch the glutinous grains and the dairy. When we eat gluten and it reaches our intestines, that's when an enzyme is produced in our intestinal wall that breaks down the gluten into its protein building blocks. Now, this can cause our gut cells to release a protein that can break the tight junctions apart. And that is because the two most powerful triggers to open up this protein door that tears apart those tight junctions is from gluten. And our gut bacteria in the small intestine says, all right, if that's where you're going, that's where we're going. Now, this protein that's present in wheat, that is such a damaging protein to so many of us, it's also in several other cereals within the grass family, and it can cross the intestinal barrier. Now, the foods besides wheat that you really have to be careful about are barley and rye, because they're also frequently in products that are out there. Oats do not contain gluten, but they do contain a similar protein. Although none of the current known epitopes, which are the part of the antigen that's recognized by the immune system, none of those from wheat, barley, and rye seem to occur in oats. So that makes it kind of complicated for those trying to decide what is safe and what isn't. And it's probably why most people, when they're paleo, eliminate it. Oats are the most likely contaminated non-gluten food. And so you have to make sure if you're going to use oats that it's certified gluten-free. It's very similar with quinoa. Some types have peptides which elicit a reaction similar to gluten in cell tests. Or, of course, we're cross-contaminated. So any pseudo grain can cause this reaction if the product has come into contact with gluten. That's why gluten-free certification matters so much. I also agree with eliminating corn or maize from your diet because maize has similar proteins to gluten and has been shown to act just like this gluten peptide in some people with gluten sensitivities. So if you have a gut problem, I want you to consider yourself, at least for the time being, gluten sensitive because of this ability for it to cross over the gut barrier. So secondly, what about the dairy? Well, in the past, I have promoted using an undenatured grass-fed whey protein, but it is still not guaranteed to be free of casein. And I've found that casein inflames the gut just like gluten. There was a study done with just 20 people with celiac that had been healing their guts for 2 years or more completely on a gluten-free diet, and they also had 15 controls that had no celiac disease. So they used a rectal process and patches of cow's milk and casein, which touched the mucosal wall. And they had done this similarly with gluten. Now, they were left for an hour, and then 15 hours later, inflammatory responses were tested for. In 10 of the 20 celiac patients, the inflammatory response to casein or milk was similar to the reaction to the gluten rectal challenge. So there was no site whatsoever in a reaction in the control group. Casein has similar properties to this gluten protein, and it is resistant to digestion, and it has some similar amino acid sequences. So if you consider if we had 24 people in this group, and maybe 1,200 say they have gluten intolerance, 600 of us are probably going to react to dairy in exactly the same way that they react to gluten, if not more. And so that's why I really recommend just ditching them both and seeing. Now, there's a lot of variations of why people turn to this group. There's lots of vegans, some raw food vegans, probably quite a few that are lacto-ovo vegans, or vegetarians, I should say, or ovo vegetarians. And then a mishmash of whole food plant-based folks that are thinking about removing the grain and seeing how they feel. So let me try to explain to you why I feel so strongly about getting people to try this as a vegan. So Susan Burkow, PhD CNS, and Neil Bernard, MD, which I'm sure you've heard of, after reviewing data from 87 published studies, they reported that a vegan or vegetarian diet is highly effective for weight loss. Now, a lot of you come in here for weight loss, but they also found that the vegetarian population has lower rates of heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity. Now, in addition, their review suggests that weight loss in vegetarians is not dependent on exercise and occurs at a rate of approximately 1 pound per week. They further stated that a vegan diet causes more calories to be burned after meals in contrast to non-vegan diets. And that's because the non-vegan diet's food is being stored as fat. Now, another study in the Journal of American Medical Association reported that women with breast cancer who regularly consumed soy products had a 32% lower risk of breast cancer reoccurrence and a 29% decreased risk of death compared with women who consumed little or no soy. Also, an analysis of 14 studies showed that an increased intake of soy resulted in a 26% reduction in prostate cancer risk. Now, there are those with breast cancer who, because of concerns over the estrogen nature of soy products, really need to discuss with their oncologist whether they should or whether they shouldn't. And there's data for both, but that's up to them and their oncologist. I'm not talking about overly processed soy-based meat substitutes that are often high in isolated soy proteins that are just a horrible process that they go through to do that, using lots of chemicals and other weird ingredients that they stick in these highly processed products that aren't going to be as healthy as, say, an organic tempeh or tofu or a cold processed soy. But this is why some soy is allowed for a W30 vegan program. And that's something that people need to understand instead of just looking at it as being paleo, no soy, move on. So how do you get started? The getting started really is the scariest part. Automated meals is what helps out a ton. So what can you eat? The Vegan Reset allows for non-glutinous pseudo grains as well as properly prepared legumes. So what does that mean? That means that you can have non-GMO soy. You can do a quick, easy lean-in by doing a big green smoothie, chia pudding, or a sweet potato bowl for breakfast. You can create salad in jars for lunch so that you can just grab and go. Mostly you're going to want to snack as you're leaning into this, as your body is adjusting. So protein bars like sprouted watermelon seeds, those are really great. There's the Luna bars, fruit, veggies, and hummus, protein shakes, and avocados. These are all ways as you get going to kind of keep yourself going. And then what's for dinner? Make it simple: soups, stir fries, burrito bowls. Just throw together veggies that you like, spice it up, and you'll be fine. After dinner, if you're still hungry, I have 2 tricks. One is a nice warm herbal tea. Second is to have what we term in our house as second dinner. It's really just some wild blueberries with a little algae oil and a non-dairy compliant milk on top. But my daughter loves it, and since she gets low blood sugar overnight, when she gets hungry, this is a nice way for her body to make it through the night. And in the group, we have lots of great recipes. I also recommend just find a few sauces and a dressing recipe that you like and keep the flavor, and that helps you lose the feeling that you're missing out. We don't think about how nutrients impact our body, but the biggest question I get is, what can I have for protein? I'm not joking. Well, let's let this question expand a little bit, because what people are really asking about are good sources of essential amino acids. So amino acids are the building blocks of making proteins or enzymes in our bodies. And you don't need to eat a complete protein, and all of your vegetables have some protein in them. A protein is nothing more than a chain of amino acids, and 9 of the 20 amino acids are considered essential because they have to come from food. The others we can synthesize in our body. So when we have an essential nutrient, it is just something we have to get from food. And the thing about proteins, as well as carbohydrates and as well as fats, is that they fall into that larger category called macronutrients. Now, macronutrients provide those building blocks as well as the calories that we need to keep the body going. This is what keeps us from being tired or being hangry during our lifestyle change. So think about the difference in terms of your car. In your car, you have the gasoline and you have the oil. To drive the human machine, just like you would drive your car, you need something similar, gas and oil. The gas, in this case, are those macronutrients. That's the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates found in our food. Those are the calories. So whenever you're eating, you're ingesting that gasoline, and that's why you need to eat. Now, supplementation on top of that is not a major source of calories, but that is your that's your micronutrients instead of your macronutrients. So we need the rainbow of food to fuel our car with the macronutrients, and we need the supplementation for the micronutrients. So what is the micronutrient component of our food? Consider that like the oil that makes the human machinery run, because it's involved in everything from our antioxidant function to cell detoxification and hormone regulation. Our micronutrients turn off and on genes. So this is an ability of plant nutrients to turn on the good genes and turn off the bad genes. And that's something that I think is super cool. And it's really what engaged me when I started this journey. Plant nutrients are really, really important. And the scientists believe that there are over 25,000 plant nutrients. So these are the micronutrients and the minerals that are found in plants. So if you aren't supplementing, you aren't doing enough for your body, in my opinion. The soil that grows our fruit and vegetables has been very depleted of nutrients, or it's high in nutrients that it shouldn't have that cause big problems. The W30 site has said that oranges aren't just vitamin C. They're a huge array of complementary vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients that work together synergistically to keep you healthy in ways that most studies say a vitamin C supplement just can't, and I agree. So that's when I supplement, I use whole food supplements, and that way they're using the whole orange and not just giving me the synthetic vitamin C. So what can you expect? Week 1 is when your body is going through the change, you've let go of things, and quite frankly, your body kind of freaks out a little bit, because if it's been having all this caffeine and all of this sugar and all of these things, it doesn't quite know what to do. It goes through a little bit of a detox sort of process, like you would if you were getting rid of drugs. And so you have to hydrate a lot. You have to be kind to yourself. And an Epsom salt bath is a really fantastic way to help you get rid of some of that headaches and aches. Now, week 2, your body is still kind of freaking out, and it starts retaining all of this stuff that it doesn't want to get rid of. And you start feeling doubt, like, why am I doing this? It's not working, and my pants are so tight. But you're getting ready to be through the hardest part. And so I really want you to stick with that, because by week 3, you're going to start feeling more energy, you're going to start feeling healthier, you're going to have that wow factor, and by the time you get into week 4, you can start fine-tuning things that you really want to start focusing on, so that it isn't just something that is about 4 weeks. And the reason I say this is because our body is always changing. The epithelial wall cells that line the walls in our gut, they have kind of a rough life, and they only last about 5 days. So people hear this and they say, wait a minute, 5 days? Well, I don't need to do that much. But what you need to understand is that ignoring just that surface cell, the average age of the main body of our gut is almost 16 years. And so if you have damaged your poor little gut, it is going to take you a lot longer than the next 30 days to start healing it up. So even though you started to renew your gut lining, you're just starting the process of healing your gut at the cellular level. Also, think about your red blood cells. They travel nearly 1,000 miles during their lifetime, and they last about 4 months before heading on to the spleen. So that's why I recommend focusing in on a 4-month program. That really gets you through that first red blood cell turnover, and you start to finally see some pretty cool changes. Also, if we think about the liver, the big friendly detoxifier that we have in our body, its turnover time is 300 to 500 days. So it can take over a year or longer to turn over those liver cells for those of us that have created this really toxic wonderland or this really sluggish liver. So don't expect it to happen just overnight. So you've been reading about this, you've been looking at it, and you're going, okay, I don't think I'm going to do this because I don't want tight pants. So let me get deeper into explaining what's going on with the tight pants. So you're eating enough, but not too many healthy fats, and yet your pants are still a lot tight, so what gives? Bloating is usually caused by partially undigested food making its way into the small or large intestine. Gut bacteria produces gas as a byproduct of the fermentation of this undigested food. And gut bacteria are present to digest parts of our diet that we are not physically able to digest ourselves. But the problem arises when there is too much undigested food to process, resulting in excess gas and bloating. So sometimes that is part of the problem. However, another part of the problem may be in your sodium and potassium intake. So when the sodium level in your blood becomes too low, extra water enters your cells and causes them to swell. When there's not enough sodium available, the gut does not contract as effectively, causing some gut motility issues, and elimination starts to slow down. Increased potassium in our diet naturally lowers sodium levels. Now, sources of potassium are avocados, potatoes, leafy greens, beans, and bananas. So when you start to feel those tight pants, usually it's a combination of the increase of healthy gut bacteria and a change in the sodium-potassium teeter-totter. So many of us actually need to make sure we are getting some healthy salt into our diet to help balance things out when we changed over to this new dietary program. I use a lovely Icelandic salt, and just from time to time I grab a little, depending on how I feel. So let's talk more about the water. So every 1 gram of carbohydrates that you're eating requires 3 to 4 grams of water to process and store it. So let me explain this in a little bit easier sort of process for you to understand. So if you eat 1 medium russet potato, you're eating about 37 grams of carbohydrates, and that requires between 111 to 148 grams of water, which is 4 to 5 ounces. If you overcarb yourself and you're not drinking enough water, you could be retaining excess water to process it. Now, you could easily get 10 pounds of weight fluctuation from water alone, depending on what you are eating as you start your transformation. So, some ways you can help is getting enough magnesium and vitamin B6. Magnesium helps to relax the intestinal smooth muscle and also pulls water into the gut. So there's a lot of great magnesium-rich foods, lots of fruits and vegetables, beans, peas, some of those gluten-free grains, soybean, seeds, and nuts. Now, something to consider is that some of those legumes, peas, and soybeans are also high in vitamin B6. Now, vitamin B6 can help reduce fluid retention, and it also assists in flushing out excess water and water-soluble wastes from the body, which makes it kind of important if you really want to get rid of all this stuff and get healthier. Now, as you're looking at the bloating and digestive problems, and you're thinking about, wow, now you're starting to look at some of the nutritional sides of all this, the number one supplement that I see people using when they come into the challenge already is an omega-3 fatty acid. Yet, guess what? Most of us can't, won't, or don't get enough omegas in our diets. Not from the high-quality plant sources. And we need a combination of the omega-3, 5, 6, 7, and 9 fatty acids that are derived from the fruits, algae, and seeds. And here's why. Number one, our body constructs hormones from our fatty acids, including the omega-6 fatty acid, which has gotten a big poo-poo from like the whole naturopathic and nutritional industry out there. And yes, there are bad omega-6s. But guess what? There are also good omega-6s. Now, the truth is that our microbiome is now considered an endocrine organ, and some considered even more powerful than the other endocrine glands. And so our microbiome has a lot to do with our hormones. And our hormones are derived from different classes of essential fatty acids. And so, like I was saying, there are different types of omega-6 fatty acids, and not all increase inflammation. Now, some of that inflammation is an important component of our immune response, like blood clotting and cell proliferation. And yet other omega-6 fatty acids actually reduce inflammation and improve reproductive cell structure, decrease risk of inflammation, and improve the condition of organs in the body. So they are something we really have to have. You all know about the omega-3 fatty acids, that they decrease inflammation, but they also regulate hormones in the body, increase cervical mucus, and promote ovulation, which is why omega-3s that are good omega-3s are really essential for women. And the reason I like the plant-based is because it's not coming from a toxic dead fish. Every cell in our body wears sort of a rain slicker of fat to keep it from being dissolved in the bloodstream. So we have to have fats. But fats that have been oxidized and gone rancid before we eat them can damage these delicate linings of our cells. And I want you to know that fresh fats don't do that. These fresh plant fats do not do that. Another omega is omega-9, and that's the one that comes from olives and olive oils, most nuts and avocados. But some nuts and nut butters can be a source of these oxidized fats. And fish oil can also be oxidized and get rancid. So some other high omega-3s besides the fish oil are flaxseed, chia seeds, soybeans, and walnuts. And then some of the omega-6 foods are flax seeds, hemp seeds, which are also high in the fat-flushing GLA, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, pine nuts, and other nuts. And so these plant-based fats are essential to help with your metabolism, your hormones, and your gut health. And as you start working on this, these fat cells that we have, when we consume a plant-based diet, what's interesting is our arteries that are growing out to feed the fat cells start to shrink, which I think is pretty cool. So we're going to keep going beyond the foods, and eventually I'll kind of circle back. But 99.999% of the micronutrients that our body needs come from these amazing plants that I've been talking about. And that's what's really missing from our diet. There are certain micronutrients that you aren't going to get an abundance of on a plant-based diet. And that's iron and B12. And then also can be vitamin D and omegas, which all varies based on your diet. Now, our body needs iron and vitamin B12 and folate to produce our red blood cells. And our red blood cells dictate our body's internal environment. And our blood cells eventually become body cells, and then vice versa. And what a lot of people don't realize is that anemia can cause weight gain, because being anemic can decrease our metabolism. Now, plants that are rich in iron include kidney beans, black beans, soybeans, spinach, raisins, cashews, cabbage, tomato juice, and gluten-free oatmeal. Sorry about that. I've been coaching now for several hours, and now my throat is just saying, enough is enough, lady. B12 is also best known for its role in the red blood cell production, right? And if you don't have enough, like me sometimes, it could increase anxiety. And if I get too much, it can increase anxiety. So that's something that's essential to know, because it's very related to the MTHFR gene mutation that I have. And so I have a lack of the enzymes responsible for the conversion of most folate. So that means that I process the folate simply because I don't need that enzyme. But it's harder for my body to process anything that isn't folate. And so this is involved in the utilization of vitamin B12 in the processing of homocysteine. And this is a variant that's found in 25% of the population. And that increases our need for folate. And so let me talk about that there's actually a misunderstanding, and everyone thinks that the folic acid is the problem. And it's just that we have far too much folic in our enriched Western diets. Folic acid has no biological activity unless it's converted into folates. And so for those with the MTHFR mutation who don't process as much folic acid into that 5-MTHF, and so when it doesn't process into that, the folic acid levels build up in the system. And elevated folic acid has this potential to stimulate pre-existing cancer cells. So if you have this mutation, especially the more severe, they say that you should only take low amounts of folic acid. Well, some people say you shouldn't take any. But to understand this, synthetic folic acid that is used in enriching our foods has to go through this huge sequence to convert to that 5-MTHF. And the last step is where it needs that MTHFR enzyme. Now, natural folate is already in the active form when we eat it, and therefore it doesn't rely on that enzyme at all. So then with the enriched high amounts of unmetabolized folic acid, this folic acid can bind to the folate receptors and essentially block that methylated, broken down folate. Now, multiple clinical trials conducted have shown that 5-MTHF is, yes, more effective compared to folic acid. And they did a study, and they did a low dose of 113 micrograms of 5-MTHF and said that that was as good and used by the body as well as 100 micrograms of folic acid. So this is where I think the problem is with most products and with most understanding. So if the methylated folate at 113 micrograms generated plasma folate the same as 100 micrograms of folic acid, then you have to understand it's about these levels. Most products either have high levels of folic or high levels of 5-MTHF, and neither seems to be doing anyone any good. Folic acid competes with the methylated folate at the folate receptors. So that's why for so many, there ends up being this high amount of folic acid floating around in the bloodstream that may reduce the amount of methylfolate in the brain. Now, so when I actually have added in extra methylfolate to my daughter's diet, she gets more anxiety, heart palpitations, and muscle pain. But when she gets her daily whole food supplement, she's fine. And I actually read this, I have to laugh, I read this on a specialist's website, that if that starts happening, I am to limit intake of leafy greens until side effects go away. This is because leafy greens also contain methylfolate and nitrates. And I just about cried. I was like, what? Whole foods are not the problem. A cup of spinach has about 130 micrograms of folate, where your average methylated folate supplement has 1,000 to 10,000 micrograms. Huge difference. My daughter's daily folate supplement has about 40% of the daily value of what she needs. And I've doubled it before, and if we double it, she's fine. She doesn't get any of the side effects. However, if I add in any methylated folate, she starts to have the side effects. Many people just do not do well with these other amounts of methylated supplementation. And research shows that the high amounts, no matter if they're methylated or not, can cause an increased risk of cancer. So if you're not being told by your doctor to do a short high dose routine, then I don't understand why you're risking it. And also, so why else does this matter? The MTHFR enzyme also helps us utilize our iron, and it helps break down the B12 and other nutrients. So it also helps break down excess metals and toxins to be removed from your body. So if you're part of the 25% and you're blocking up those folate receptors and you aren't eating a lot of the iron-rich foods or the B12, well, you could actually be making yourself feel worse. That's why I believe a little metabolically active form of folic acid with your folate is not a bad thing. As a vegan, you want to make sure you're getting enough iron and bioavailable B12, and if you're doing all of these things, then you should be okay. So what else do we have to consider in our diets? Well, some of us have a VDR mutation, and that means that you have difficulty in maintaining vitamin D levels without use of supplementation. Also, some of us, it's just because of where we live. Mushrooms are one of the few plants that contain a precursor to vitamin D2. Vitamin D often comes from lichen, which is a symbiosis between fungi and algae. Now, vitamin D2 from plants does not convert as highly as vitamin D3. But the problem is vitamin D3 in most supplements has been chemically converted from a compound in lanolin. That's right. And some people have had an allergic reaction to the lanolin. Now, for those of us that are latitudes north of Atlanta in the US, we just don't get enough sun. And if you're like me and you were taught to protect your skin, then you're probably getting even less. And then deficiency risk jumps if you have darker skin. It jumps if you're an older adult or if you're obese or overweight. Now, when I first tested my vitamin D in Seattle, it was 29 and my iron stores were 8. And it was really funny because my doctor laughed and said she was wondering how I was getting along without falling asleep. But the truth was that I was almost falling asleep, and I would drive to pick up my husband from work and make him drive home so that I wouldn't fall asleep during the commute. If you are under 20 on your vitamin D test, you are deficient. If you're under 30, you're insufficient. You have to be between 40 to 65 to be considered optimal. And then if you get above 80, they say you're in excess. Now, I've actually heard doctors that say that they would prefer you get up to 90, but you want to talk to your general practitioner about that. But I was insufficient, and I had been eating what I thought was a well diet. I had been drinking a superfood shake for several years, and I thought that I was getting everything my body needed, including a multivitamin, but I was not. So even as I started adding in iron supplementation, it wasn't doing my body any good because of my genetics and because of that mutation. And so it was a process that really took years for me to figure out. And now I know that my supplementation really impacts my iron, and that the amount of iron that I need is really dependent on a lot of things, including my fitness routine. So iron is lost in sweat. Also, repeated pounding of the feet on hard surfaces can destroy red blood cells, which allows for iron to be lost. And then for some of us, if you take anti-inflammatory drugs, that can lead to iron loss. Now, what I use now for anti-inflammation is I use turmeric powder. And that's because despite its anti-inflammatory compounds, it does not affect iron absorption from the diet. So turmeric in your food when you're cooking is not going to cause iron deficiency. Just wanted to cover that. Now, dietary iron recommendations increase 1.3 to 1.7 times higher if you're active, and then also 1.8 times higher for a vegetarian. So if you're an active vegan or vegetarian, you really have to keep that in mind. So how can you get your iron? Well, you can supplement, and sometimes I do supplement. I get 20% of my iron in my daily shake, and so with food sources, I'm generally able to make up the rest. You only need about 15 to 20 milligrams of iron a day. So if I'm strength training, I can use a lot of iron. And with the lower conversion of folate, that's where the low ferritin levels were coming in. So if I feel myself moving into a higher strength training or anything that can lower my iron, then I'll use an organic vegan iron, and then I'm not beat by midday. But that's also because I have allergies to seeds and nuts, and I really don't eat a lot of legumes or beans, very, very rarely, very minimal. And so that means, well, beyond soy, but that's even minimal. So I need to watch what I'm doing, and I need to be aware of what my body's telling me. And that's something that I wanted you to be aware of. So what can you eat? If you're doing a vegan reset, the information has been updated out there a little bit better, but pretty much it's very similar to what's been on the shopping list all along. So no gluten-containing grains, no peanuts or corn, they're very fungal, no alcohol, no sugar and artificial sweeteners, no sweets, treats, and baked goods. Now, what you need to know is that you can have grains and legumes as long as they are non-gluten and still no peanuts, and that it is prepared properly. So choices of gluten-free grains are amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, rice, although I really only ever recommend white rice, millet, sorghum, and teff. I believe if this is your first reset, you should do your best to go without. If you want to lose weight, limit some of these foods. Don't do too much. Just get enough to get what you need. Now, soy is a problem for some because it's one of the highest allergens. I dealt with that, but it turns out that I was allergic to the GMO soy. So keep your soy consumption as healthy as possible and choose organic or fermented. Make sure that it's very cold processed or unprocessed. So organic tofu or tempeh, netto, you can do edamame, but stay away from those vegetarian burgers because they usually are not cold processed. They're usually not done very well, and they have a lot of weird things in them. You can make your own though, as beans are allowed on the vegan reset, but since they are a product that can cause some digestive distress, be careful. If you're going to include the beans, make sure that you are doing the full soaking, rinsing, cooking process. Similarly, if you're going to do gluten-free grains, make sure that if you can, sprout them. That's going to be far easier for your body to digest. And so if you're taking extra care to prepare your foods, you're going to reduce some of the anti-nutrient compounds and also release some of the beneficial vitamins and minerals that we've talked about. Now, one thing to consider is that research has shown the mineral binding effect of these anti-nutrients in coconut is essentially non-existent. So coconut flour is your best source for your program. I know a lot of people are starting to use cassava, but again, I have a latex hypersensitivity, and so I don't use cassava at all because it can be a problem. So again, for your proteins, all your plants have proteins in them. My favorite plant sources are cauliflower, avocado, artichokes, leafy greens, potatoes, broccoli, mushrooms, and sprouted watermelon seeds. Just listen to your body and you'll do just fine. You can also in the not the best but the okay zone, you can use vegan protein mixes like the shake that I like, hemp or pea protein, organic tofu, lentils, various soaked and rinsed beans, and then your tempeh, natto, and edamame. If you are not vegan, you might be using pastured eggs or pastured and organic full-fat fermented yogurt or kefir. But remember that research is showing that eggs can be as bad for your body as smoking, especially if you're over 40, if you're eating them every single day. And that's because most people that are eating them are not just having one egg. Also, dairy is very mucus forming, and it can be a problem if you have that gluten sensitivity. So your best bet is just try to do it vegan and see how you feel. What about the vegetables? Pretty much if it's a vegetable and it's not corn, you can eat it. Eat it and enjoy it because you're eating a rainbow. Similarly with fruits, your berries are your best choices in your melons and some of your citrus. But you can also do the mangoes and the nectarines and the oranges and the dates and the apples and the figs and the pineapple. Just don't overdo it because obviously some fruits are higher in fructose than others, and that can also be a digestive issue. And definitely limit the dried fruit. It's like little tiny lovely little sugars. Don't do it. Now again, fats, also very essential, these lovely plant-based fats. I love algae oil. I cook with coconut oil. I also like good quality extra virgin olive oil. Those fats that you can eat, of course, are your avocados and your nuts like cashews and your coconut flakes and your macadamia nuts and your olives, almonds and pine nuts and pumpkin seeds and flax seeds and Brazil nuts and hemp seeds and walnuts. All of those are your nuts. Again, vegetarians might want to try to add in ghee or cultured butter, but if you have gut issues or are all gluten sensitive, just stick away from it. There's no reason, and you might as well try and see how you do without it. We have had about 2,500 people join our page looking to go through this sort of a program. And I have 3,000 that are following me on the Paleo Veggie page in Facebook, which I think really goes to show that we have an interest in going green. And it's actually very easy to stay connected because I have the blog page. www.paleoveggio.com. I have the Facebook page, Paleo Veggio, and I have a variety of Facebook groups. And so it's easy to get support and get recipes and get ideas without having to do much other than coming and engaging. And I promise if you engage, you'll get the most out of it. Also, every month I offer a 10-day program where you can really push the ideas that you're getting from a 30-day reset into something bigger and also something that's more doable for everyday living and doable every month rather than just doing it once a year, which is what a lot of people do with these 30-day programs. And that's if they get through the 30 days. So it's really 10 powerful days where we get rid of the unhealthy habits and we establish new ones in a supportive and vibrant community. For 10 days, we shred all of the foods and habits that are not serving us. and we eliminate those foods that are causing the problems in our guts. Then we simply focus on flooding our bodies with whole food nutrition at a higher level than we would do normally during the 30-day vegan reset. Now, this program that I offer is something for people, especially if you've been unable or have struggled with doing a W30 program, because it's very simplistic. It's 10 days, so it's only one weekend. Plus, it is a 4-month period of education and detoxification support that really revolutionizes the way that you look at your health. It includes a support team. There's a Revolution Recipes cookbook that serves as a guide to help you prepare nutritious foods that your whole family will enjoy. And this book is a 100-page cookbook that's filled with full-color photographs, step-by-step instructions, and a variety of recipes ranging from simple to like really fantastic. So there's really something for everyone. And you also get 3 months of the 10-day program and 4 months of increased whole foods through a special support tool that's really quite unlike anything you've ever used. You also get a 50-page guide that's filled with tips and education and healthcare professional recommendations, additional recipes, smoothie ideas, on-the-go snack lists, and more. Truly, nutrition is the foundation of this. So we have to flood our bodies with the most important foods that we could ever eat, which are raw fruits, vegetables, and berries. These are not just good for us, they're absolutely critical. We are supposed to eat a wide variety of 9 to 13 servings every day, but almost no one does. So think about it. How many days in the past week have you gotten in 9 to 13 servings of fruits, vegetables, and berries? And that's where this program comes into the process. We use additional supplementation that allows you to get over 30 different raw, vine-ripened whole foods. So it's non-GMO, it's NSF certified to be pure, and so I call it a salad in a capsule. Now, it's important to understand the process that these fruits and vegetables go through in order to be encapsulated or put into chewable form. So the fruits, vegetables, and berries are completely vine ripened. They remain attached to the plant until the nutrition is fully developed. The fruits and vegetables are then ground up, which is better than simply juicing, because then they can use the entire whole food, including the peels, the leaves, and the seeds whenever possible, which provides much more nutrition. In the example of the orange that I used before, up to 80% of the vitamin C is found in the peel. And I don't know about you, but I'm not eating orange peels very often. This way I can. It is also slowly dried at low temperatures, which preserves the live nutrients, and then put into capsules and chewables. It's all scientifically proven, which I love because I am a science geek. And knowing that this was the most researched nutritional product in the world, with all of these published studies in peer-reviewed medical journals, meant the world to me. It meant the world to me that it was food with a nutritional label and not a vitamin with a vitamin label. And so looking at it, it was the same label that I would see on a bag of frozen broccoli in the grocery store. The government considers this food. There's no warning label, which means that it's safe for people of all ages, whether they're pregnant or nursing, whether it's a child or the elderly, and even some professional athletes have finally figured out and gotten on board. So this is just amazing. The added fuel through the shake, again, is vegan and gluten-free and whole food protein, fiber, amino acids, fruits, and vegetables, which is perfect to serve for a quick meal or post-workout recovery or even a healthy snack. I am always looking for those wellness-oriented people that want to contribute to the Nourished Warriors tribe. And so if you want to make this something more than just a quick start to your own nutrition, let me know. The Nourished Warriors Freedom Revolution is a really fun business community, and there's an opportunity to bring freedom to all of us through improved health. But I want you to know that that's not what this is about, because 80% of these products and programs are being used by happy customers who have no affiliation with the business side of this equation. So don't think that that's what this is about. Now, serving these customers is a group of people like myself that have partnered with the business side of it. And yet, we are paid well to do a lot of good in the world. And so if you're listening and you think that there's someone in your life who may need to hear what's possible, I open you up to being aware of that. Because it wasn't until I adopted this into my life that my skin changed, my wellness changed, and that is why I partnered with this program, was because I personally saw the results. That's why it means so much to me, just like Paleo Veggie means so much to me. So if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about here, you can find me at Dier Girl. On Facebook, you can find me at Paleo Veggie, or you can find the Paleo Veggie website, www.paleoveggie.com, and I have links to all of the groups there. It has been a fun hour. I loved every minute of it, and so I'm going to end our recording and take questions. Let me know if there's anything else I can help you with. It's been a fantastic night. Love you, tribe. And 2018 goal, put your health and wellness first. Talk to you again soon.